The legislation signed into law by President Joe Biden banning the popular social media app TikTok has many people fearful, confused, agitated, and even outright angry. For some, it's a potential loss of valued entertainment and community. To others, a loss of news and information they don't trust from anywhere else. And to millions of others, it's a threat of losing their ability to make money. But what is really at stake is greater than the struggle of two world superpowers and their battle over national security. There is more to the story with much greater consequences. Consequences that reach beyond the millions of people who use TikTok, affecting all of mankind. We will unpack how the battle over TikTok points us to the real battle we face in our lives on this episode of the Field Journal Podcast.
Navigate these uncharted times of chaos and confusion with the Field Journal Podcast, where each episode we decipher the events unfolding all around us with the steadfast truth of the kingdom story. Together, we'll focus on developing an eternal perspective so we can have peace and hope despite our circumstances. Now here's your guide, Kirk Buckner.
Welcome to the Field Journal Podcast, where we observe the world through the lens of the kingdom story so we can have clarity, peace, and hope in these unprecedented times. Today we're going to talk about an event that occurred this past week that has many young people up in arms and frustrated with the U.S. government threatening to take away something that they value, enjoy, and use for hours every day. On Wednesday, April 24th, 2024, President Joe Biden signed into law the National Security Package. According to the White House, this $95 billion spending package will, quote, deliver critical support to Israel and Ukraine, provide desperately needed humanitarian aid to Gaza, Sudan, Haiti, and other locations impacted by conflicts and natural disasters around the world, and bolster security and stability in the Indo-Pacific, end quote. So we could talk about how sending foreign aid is a national security package, but that is not what makes this bill interesting. What makes the national security package interesting is that this new law also calls for the Chinese-owned company ByteDance to sell its immensely popular social media app TikTok to a more U.S.-friendly owner in 9 months or lose its ability to be available to consumers in the U.S. market. Well, why is this interesting? Well, first of all, in case you're not a TikTok user, let me explain what it is. TikTok is a social media platform for mobile users that allows people to create and share short videos, typically set to music or other audio clips. It has become extremely popular, especially among younger generations, for its user-friendly interface and the ability to easily create and share content. This is one of the many social media platforms that have brought forth a new category of people called content creators. TikTok and other apps like it essentially open up the ability for individuals to become their own TV studio, launching millions of people creating content for entertainment, to teach, inform, and sell products and services. TikTok boasts 170 million users in the United States. That is just over half of the U.S. population. Think about that. Half of America uses this platform. These 170 million users are predominantly under 30 years old. It's an app built to attract a younger demographic. Because of the target demographic of young people, there is an estimated 7 million U.S. individuals or businesses selling products and services on the TikTok platform, according to ByteDance. So why does the U.S. government want it banned? According to the FBI, TikTok threatens U.S. national security because the Chinese government could use it to spy on Americans or weaponize it covertly to influence the U.S. public by amplifying or suppressing certain content, essentially spreading what the U.S. government would classify as propaganda. Chinese intelligence law requires all Chinese companies to provide data to the Chinese government where it deems it necessary for the national security interest. The U.S. intelligence community, CIA, NSA, FBI, believes that the data could then be used to target Americans with specific misinformation or disinformation campaigns. And this is what TikTok does. It takes the information it knows about users and serves them up specific content that they believe the user would like or respond to. TikTok effectively works like a TV channel to the younger generation, and most see the content not only as entertaining, but as a credible news source. And we've talked about how the human brain is wired for story, and young people are influenced by the stories on TikTok. It's a story platform full of content creators that the U.S. government has no control over. Think about that. In December of 2022, FBI Director Chris Wray stated that TikTok is controlled by a Chinese government that, quote, doesn't share our values and could use it for influence operations, end quote. Simply put, our government does not want the Chinese government communicating narratives, telling stories to the American people that it cannot control. Now that seems noble, right? This is what you want your government to do, protect you from foreign influence, especially one that is largely considered to be an enemy to our way of thinking or way of life. As FBI Director Wray put it, doesn't share our values. But when we dig deeper, we understand that it's more than just that. The government, your government, is interested in narrative control. They want to control the message on the social media platforms because to them, the biggest threat to national security are messages that they cannot influence or control. And think about it. They cannot have any influence on a Chinese company over what can be said or not said on this widely popular app called TikTok. You see, influence is the key word for all of this. It is well documented that the U.S. owns social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube have hired numerous former FBI, CIA, NSA, and other State Department employees. When Elon Musk bought Twitter, he made available internal company communications, since been labeled as the Twitter files, documenting the government's direct involvement with information they wanted policed regarding the last election. They manipulated the narrative by requesting that these social media companies suppress the stories, making them not available to many on the platform, or have it challenged as misinformation. In some cases, they ask that the content creator's content or the creator themselves get banned entirely from the platform. And who is the U.S. government talking to within the companies to make these requests? You guessed it, the former government employees who worked in the CIA, FBI, NSA, and the like. Now, this is not an anti-government podcast. We're looking at these things like the TikTok ban through the lens of the kingdom story, God's story. Through the kingdom story lens, we understand that the power of influence on the story or stories being told, especially spiritually. Recall in episode 4 of the Field Journal podcast, we talked extensively about the dynamic influencer, whom the Bible refers to as the devil or Satan. He is the original influencer and is still very much an active force behind false narratives. So we have a choice. We can look at these things like TikTok with our natural eyes and believe it's just about power and control over propaganda. Or we can also see what is at play in the unseen realm, where there's a spiritual battle of good versus evil occurring all around us every day. And there is precedence for influence operations as told in the kingdom story. Let's take a look. Recall the very first one is the serpent in the garden. He deceives Eve, the woman, into transgressing what God had told Adam that he should not do, eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil. And he does this by convincing her that it will be a benefit to her and to Adam if they eat from that tree. And I'm not going to go through the whole story again, but you understand that there are consequences that happened when that occurred. And we have to think about this. The serpent did not go on holiday and stop deceiving after that. We see evidence of this right before the flood, that the Lord said in Genesis 6:5 that wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And so he makes this observation and he cleanses the earth, and millions of people die in the flood but there's only one family that's right with God and is on the ark. And the question becomes, how do millions of people on the planet become so wicked that it hurts the heart of God and he essentially starts over? It's spiritual influence, sin crouching behind the door. Now, just before Genesis 6:5, it says in Genesis 6:4 this: the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Now, who are the sons of God? Well, the sons of God typically in the Bible are referred to as angels, and in this case are fallen angels. These fallen angels had influence over mankind, leading to wickedness over the entire earth, literally and likely millions of people. And we get this idea that Noah and his family were the restart of mankind on the earth. They're given the creation assignment, which is to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. We see this in Genesis 9:1 and also 9:7. And 400 to 500 years later, mankind has been fruitful and multiplied, but it did not fill the earth. Well, how do we know this? Because they're all in one area. Listen to this, Genesis 11:1-2. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. That's Genesis 11:3. And then it says in 11:4 that they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." That's Genesis 11:4. Now think about this. They are fruitful and they multiply, but they don't fill the earth. They are in one place, and they use the modern technology they have, which were bricks, to build a tower to the sky. And they have this idea, if they don't build this tower to the sky, that they'll be spread about over the entire face of the earth. Well, where do they get this idea? There's spiritual influence happening here. It doesn't say it directly, but it makes sense that it would happen. Like, where is the devil and his dark kingdom? Well, they're likely right there where all of the world has essentially congregated, and they're whispering the lies, they're deceiving, and they're trying to get mankind to transgress against God. God understands this and responds. He says this, as recorded in Genesis 11:7. "Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Now think about it, it makes sense. If you spread mankind over the face of the earth and they don't have the same language, it's harder for the enemy who tells a false narrative, who deceives, to do that. It's much easier for the enemy, the serpent, devil, Satan, to communicate that to a group that has all the same language and can retell the false story and do the things to transgress against God that the enemy wants to have happen. Now it also says in Genesis 11:9 that the name of the place was called Babel, or in Hebrew, Bavel, because that's where the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Now, Bavel is the same Hebrew word for Babylon in the Bible, and Babylon is often used to symbolize evil, sin, and rebellion against God. It is a literal historical place located in modern-day Iraq, in the same geographical location as the land of Shinar. And this is where it really gets interesting, because God is going to tell us about a Babylon in the future, one that will influence the entire world. Listen to this. According to Revelation 17:3, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. On her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. The woman is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. This Babylon of the future is foretold in the book of Revelation in chapters 17 and 18 with great amounts of symbolism and imagery that can make it hard to understand. But it is the influence that it has on the world and who has the influence that is the key lesson for us here. And the Apostle Paul talks about this in Ephesians 6, about the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places that is our real battle. Listen to this with that in mind. And the angel cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean bird and hateful bird. That's Revelation 18:2. Well, so what? Well, let me make this clear. You and I are living in an age of influence like no other time in history. And it is a mistake to believe you're only dealing with humanity, flesh and blood. What the Apostle Paul says is real. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. That's Ephesians 6:12. There's a mystery Babylon, a Babylon of the future that will work to influence the entire world. The kings of the earth, the power brokers, the ones that rule over nations and over businesses, they're going to be drawn to this place. Think about it as like Las Vegas, right? Like Sin City on steroids. All of the merchants that want to sell goods. And it's also said that the saints, the chosen people of God, will be persecuted there. It will be a horrible place to be if you're in the kingdom of God and for his future reign. But God's in this story, right? And he tells us about this ahead of time so we'll know and understand. You see, the struggle to influence and control the narrative is part of our lives now, and it will only get worse as it leads to this future Babylon. And this struggle of influence, you can't solve it by political party affiliation or news channel association or just minding your own business. If you want to be prepared, we are told what to do by Paul when he suggests that the problem is the real fight against spiritual forces of wickedness. But what does he say? Put on the full armor of God, which is simply being a dedicated disciple of Jesus, to know the story and believe in the King and follow him. It's not easy, but it's simple. Now, I want to wrap up this episode. And I want to leave you something to think about, meditate, or to pray about. This is a good exercise to challenge your heart and mind and get you out of your normal, distracted world that we live in. Now, here's the question. What is the method that you have used historically to test if something is true or not? Has that been effective for you? Is knowing what is true possible in this day and age? I hope you'll spend some time thinking about that. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode. Until next time, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
Thank you for being a part of this episode of the Field Journal Podcast, a production of Truth of the Kingdom. And while we've reached the end of our journey today, the conversation continues at truthofthekingdom.com. Until next time, may the kingdom story be your source of truth and hope, no matter what's happening around you.